Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome this statement from the Home Secretary and that there will now be a national inquiry. Does the Home Secretary think that that will be finished within, let's say, 2 years for the British people? And given that she quite rightly apologised to the victims and survivors, will she now apologise on behalf of the Prime Minister, who smeared and labelled those of us who called for a national inquiry?
Yeah.
Well, he raises the issue about the timescale for this, and in the discussions that we have had with Baroness Casey, and also recognising the many issues that people want to raise with an inquiry, we had expected that it might take around 3 years. Clearly, if the Commission is able to work faster than that, then people will clearly want answers as swiftly as possible. But final details about the timings will obviously need to be determined. I think we do need to make sure that we are both implementing the recommendations of previous inquiries and also making sure that we are pursuing these further investigations in local areas as swiftly as possible. And I do reiterate in my statement earlier the recognition of the huge harm that has been done to victims and survivors through decades. And I would urge him to look at that section of Louise Casey's report with the 17 pages of failure year after year after year to follow through and to take action. And I do believe that victims and survivors are owed an apology for that failure over very many years.
Lawrence Eshelome.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think it's fair to say there are many issues in this House which we may disagree on, but an issue of this magnitude is something that should bring all of us as parliamentarians together to work to ensure we get justice for those victims. The Home Secretary has outlined the next phase of this, but if we're really honest with ourselves, for every victim who's come forward to share her horrific testimony, there are so many more girls up and down the country who have not come forward. So it's in their interest that we make sure we get this right as a country. The Home Secretary has outlined the issues around data and the lack of data gathering. One of the areas I've raised consistently is around criminal exploitation by gangs who sexually exploit young people and then use them to carry out their horrific county lines up and down the country. Does the Home Secretary agree that that collection of data must also lay with the Met Police forces, other chief police forces across the country and British Transport Police?
My honourable friend is right that so many victims and survivors don't come forward, and we need to make it easier for people to do so and recognise the scale of the abuse that takes place. But I agree with her on this really important issue about the county lines and the interaction between criminal exploitation and sexual exploitation. Too often the county lines and criminal exploitation is seen as an issue involving teenage boys, but very often teenage girls are also drawn in, and very often that also means sexual exploitation as well. I don't believe enough investigation has been done yet into this particular pattern and form of child sexual abuse and exploitation. As we strengthen the law on criminal exploitation of children, we need to make sure that this issue is properly pursued, as she says, as part of the data gathering, but further research as well.
Esther Magdalen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government has been dragged kicking and screaming to deliver a national inquiry, having dismissed the pleas of a nation for one as jumping on a far-right bandwagon. This reluctance is why my honourable friend for Great Yarmouth will continue with his inquiry, and I will be supporting him in this. But can I ask the Home Secretary, will this government's inquiry investigate the political motivations behind the cover-ups, including the role of the Labour Party, or will this continue to be swept under the carpet?
What I say to the honourable member is I think everyone should want not just to get to the truth about past failures, but also to make sure that we make the changes to protect children for the future as well. That includes changes in social services, it includes changes in policing and the police operation that I hope that she would welcome to take action to put perpetrators behind bars, and also the action to gather proper ethnicity data, which simply has not been gathered properly before, and where Louise Casey's report is very clear. It is totally inadequate, the data gathering that her previous government left behind. So I hope she would agree to all of those being extremely important so that we can get stronger protection and truth for victims.
Elsie Blunder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the government's announcement that there will be a national inquiry. Every penny spent on stamping out the evil of child abusers is money well spent. And although welcome, notice of this inquiry will undoubtedly cause a great deal of trauma and distress for both historic and present-day victims as violations committed against them are revisited. As the honourable member opposite referenced, what steps can the government take to ensure that victims and witnesses have access to robust mental health support? And how can we ensure that our courts, as my honourable friend, the member for Oldham East and Saddleworth mentioned, especially in places like Greater Manchester, which face extensive court backlogs, are sufficiently resourced to ensure that at the end of this process, justice is finally delivered?
Thank my honourable friend for that question. I know she has championed victims and survivors in her area and community, and she is right to say that we have to make sure that victims and survivors get support. 7,000 victims and survivors gave evidence to the original Professor Alexis J. inquiry. That's why it's so important that they did not do so in vain, and we make the reforms and the changes for that recommendation. But she's also right to say we need to increase the therapeutic support for victims and survivors, and that will start with providing additional support for children.
Dr. Luke Evans.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Chair. And one of the reasons 6 months ago in January I wasn't supportive of the strategy the government had was the fact that it couldn't compel local inquiries to bring forward witnesses. That is a key bit. Now, in listening to her answers very carefully, could she clarify, will those local inquiries be able to compel witnesses? Is it them? Is it the national side as well? And will those powers be used to ensure there is no stone unturned?
So the answer is yes, and I do recognise that this is an issue that the honourable member has raised. I did say back in January that I would undertake further work to make sure that the local investigations did have the powers to compel witnesses to be able to get the evidence. We have concluded, we agree with Baroness Casey, that the right way to do this is to have the national inquiry. So that national inquiry will mean that there are full powers to compel witnesses, to compel evidence in every local investigation that takes place. Those investigations will be directed by the National Commission, by the National Inquiry, as to where and how they take place to make sure they've got those full powers in place.
Chris Murray.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The crime we are discussing today is not just an historic crime. It is happening right now out in communities, and we are failing to protect the current victims of this awful child abuse. So I welcome the new inquiry, but my concern is delay. We have had plenty of inquiries, task forces and reviews where the conclusions have not been implemented. My concern is that this new inquiry will monopolise our attention and not the focus on protecting victims right now. So will the Home Secretary commit that this inquiry will not detract or divert resource from the recommendations we know need to be implemented? And will she also commit that the child trafficking devolved pilot, which we know has been working for 4 years, will be rolled out nationally to protect child victims?
Yes, I can tell him that we are going to expand that, and also that we will not let up in the pace of implementing measures and recommendations. That includes the work the Education Secretary is doing already on mandatory reporting, mandatory sharing of data on children at risk, and also the unique identifiers, the work in the Crime and Policing Bill on mandatory reporting, but also, crucially, the police operation. So we have already increased the resources for the policing operations to be able to review closed cases. That is why we already have 800 cases identified for review. We expect that to rise very shortly to over 1,000 cases that were closed with no further action being taken, now being looked at again now, not waiting for the inquiry, but also taking action on them now in order to protect children.
Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The honourable member for Sheffield South East and I are the sole members of the House that are still here that served on the Housing, Communities and Local Government Select Committee when we conducted the inquiries into